Helena Park stood frozen in her doorway, staring at the pink gift box sitting on her kitchen counter like a beautiful snake ready to strike. The silver ribbon caught the afternoon light streaming through her window, making it gleam like a blade. Her hands shook as she reached for it, then stopped when she heard the soft padding of small feet behind her. "Mom, that's the same box Aunt Leah sent when Grandma died." The words hit Helena like ice water. She turned to see her 8-year-old daughter Eliana backing away from the kitchen, her dark eyes wide with the kind of fear that children feel when they sense something adults try to hide. Helena's breath caught in her throat. She remembered that box now, the same pink paper, the same silver ribbon, arriving 3 days after her mother's funeral with no explanation, no card. "Eliana, go to your room, baby." "But Mom." "Now." Helena waited until she heard Eliana's bedroom door close before she approached the box again. Her wedding anniversary was supposed to be special today. She had planned everything perfectly: dinner reservations at the restaurant where she and her husband first met, a new dress hanging in her closet, even arranged for Eliana to stay with her best friend overnight. But now this box sat in her kitchen like a bomb waiting to explode. She lifted the lid with trembling fingers. Inside, nestled in white tissue paper, lay her grandmother's antique necklace, the one that had been passed down through generations of Park women. But it was broken, the delicate chain snapped in two, the precious stones scattered like tears across the bottom of the box. Helena's heart hammered against her ribs. This necklace had been locked in her safe deposit box. Only 3 people knew the combination: herself, her husband, and her brother. She picked up the broken pieces, feeling the weight of generations of women who had worn this necklace on their wedding days, their anniversaries, their most precious moments. Then she saw it. Buried beneath the tissue paper was a small black USB drive. Helena stared at it for a long moment, knowing that whatever was on that drive would change everything. Her hands moved without her permission, pulling it free from the tissue paper. She walked to her laptop on shaking legs, her mind racing with possibilities, each one worse than the last. The drive contained a single video file dated 3 weeks ago. Helena clicked play and watched her world collapse. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Her husband sat in what looked like her brother's home office, his face serious as he leaned forward in his chair. Across from him sat her brother and another man she didn't recognize, middle-aged, wearing an expensive suit, carrying himself with the confidence of someone used to being in charge. "The archivist job is perfect," her husband was saying, his voice carrying clearly through her laptop speakers. "She spends all day alone with old documents and books. Easy to claim she's been talking to herself, losing track of time, forgetting things." Helena's vision blurred. She had to pause the video, her hands shaking so hard she could barely control the mouse. The archivist job, her dream job at the city's historical society, the position she had worked years to earn, the work that gave her life meaning beyond being a wife and mother. She forced herself to keep watching. "The trust fund is worth $3 million, her brother's voice came through the speakers. "Once we have her declared mentally incompetent, everything transfers to you as her husband, then we split it like we discussed." "What about the kid?" the stranger asked. "Temporary guardianship goes to my wife," her brother replied casually, as if discussing the weather. "She's a lawyer, looks good on paper. Once everything's settled, we can figure out long-term arrangements." Helena felt bile rise in her throat. They were talking about Eliana like she was a piece of property to be moved around for their convenience. "The key is making it look gradual," the stranger continued. "Document everything. Missed appointments, strange behavior, anything that supports the narrative of mental decline." Her husband nodded eagerly. "I've already started. I've been telling her friends and co-workers that she's been forgetful lately, that I'm worried about her." Helena's mind flashed back to recent conversations. Her friend mentioning that her husband had called asking if she was okay. Her supervisor at work pulling her aside to ask if everything was all right at home. The concerned looks from neighbors when she picked up her mail. The video continued for another 10 minutes, detailing their plan with the cold precision of a business meeting. They discussed timeline, documentation, even which doctor to use for the psychiatric evaluation, someone who owed the stranger a favor. When the video ended, Helena sat in her kitchen staring at the black screen, feeling like she was drowning in betrayal. The man she had loved for 9 years, who had held her hand during her mother's funeral, who kissed their daughter goodnight every evening, had been planning to destroy her life for money. But as the shock began to wear off, something else took its place. Something cold and calculating that she didn't recognize in herself but welcomed like an old friend. Helena Park had spent her entire career preserving the past, documenting truth, ensuring that history's stories were told accurately. She understood better than most that the real power lay not in the loud, dramatic moments, but in the quiet accumulation of evidence, the patient gathering of facts, the methodical building of an unshakable case. Her husband and brother thought they knew her quiet Helena, gentle Helena, Helena who never raised her voice or made waves. They had no idea what they had just awakened. She ejected the USB drive and held it up to the light, watching it gleam like the silver ribbon on the box that had delivered it. Someone had sent her this evidence. Someone wanted her to know the truth. She would find out who later, but right now she had work to do. Helena walked to her bedroom and looked at the dress hanging in her closet, the dress she had bought for their anniversary dinner. She smiled for the first time since opening the box, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a woman who had just realized she held all the cards in a game her opponents didn't even know they were playing. She had always been underestimated. Tonight, that would become her greatest weapon. Helena canceled their dinner reservation. She called the restaurant and told them there had been a family emergency, her voice perfectly steady despite the storm raging inside her chest. Then she called her friend to pick up Eliana as planned, kissing her daughter goodbye and promising they would talk soon about everything. "Is Daddy coming home tonight?" Eliana asked from the doorway, her backpack slung over her small shoulders. "I don't know, baby. But don't worry about that, okay? Just have fun at Sophie's house." After Eliana left, Helena poured herself a glass of wine and sat down to watch the video again. This time she took notes, her archivist training kicking in automatically. She documented every detail: dates, times, names mentioned, financial figures discussed. $3 million. That's what her life was worth to them. The money came from her grandmother's trust fund, set up decades ago when her family had owned significant property in the city. Helena had never cared much about the money. It sat in accounts managed by her brother, generating interest, providing security but never luxury. She lived off her own salary, drove a modest car, shopped at regular stores. The trust fund was supposed to be Eliana's future, her education, her opportunities. Now she understood why her brother had been so insistent on managing her finances all these years. Why he had discouraged her from taking a more active role in the trust's administration. He had been planning this for years, maybe since their mother died. Helena's phone buzzed with a text from her husband. "Sorry honey, got stuck at work. Rain check on dinner?" She stared at the message, remembering how he had kissed her forehead that morning and wished her a happy anniversary. How he had promised to make tonight special. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, wanting to type back everything she had learned, to scream at him through the phone. Instead she wrote, "Of course. Love you." The lie felt strange on her fingers but necessary. If they thought they were playing a game, she needed to play it better than they ever could. Helena spent the evening researching. She pulled up financial records, legal documents, anything she could find related to her trust fund and family assets. What she discovered made her stomach turn. The process had already begun. Over the past 6 months, her brother had been quietly moving money around, restructuring accounts, setting up the legal framework for what they planned to do. Her sister-in-law's name appeared on several documents as a backup trustee, positioned to take control if Helena was declared incompetent. Her sister-in-law, Rachel, who smiled at family gatherings and brought expensive wine to dinner parties and always asked about Helena's work with such apparent interest. Rachel, who was building a political career as a family law attorney, specializing in protecting vulnerable adults from financial abuse. The irony was so bitter Helena almost laughed. She found emails between Rachel and her brother, discussing Helena's situation, in carefully neutral language that could be interpreted as concern but clearly meant something else entirely. References to episodes Helena had never had, concerning behavior, that existed only in their imagination. They had been building a paper trail for months, creating a fictional version of Helena who was unstable, forgetful, possibly mentally ill. And they had been doing it so carefully, so systematically, that even Helena began to doubt her own memories as she read their fabricated concerns. Had she really missed that appointment last month, or had they canceled it and told everyone she forgot? Had she actually seemed confused at her nephew's birthday party, or had they planted that story afterward? The gaslighting was so complete, so professional, that Helena felt her grip on reality wavering. But then she looked at the video again and the doubt vanished. These people had sat in a room and planned to destroy her life for money. They had discussed her daughter's future like she was a stock option. They had turned her into a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed. Helena closed her laptop and walked to the mirror in her hallway. The woman looking back at her was someone she barely recognized, not because she looked different, but because she felt different. The quiet, accommodating Helena was still there, but underneath was something harder, sharper. Something dangerous. Her phone rang. Her husband's name appeared on the screen. "Hi, honey," she answered, her voice warm and loving. "Hey, I'm really sorry about tonight. This project has been crazy." "It's okay. I understand." Helena watched herself in the mirror as she spoke, fascinated by how easily the words came. "Actually, I'm feeling a little tired anyway. Maybe it's better we stayed in. Are you feeling all right? You've seemed a little off lately." There it was. The setup. The beginning of their narrative about her declining mental state. "I'm fine," she said, then paused deliberately. "Actually, no. I've been feeling a little scattered lately. Forgetting things. It's probably just stress from work." She could practically hear him smiling through the phone. "Maybe you should see someone about that. Dr. Morrison is supposed to be really good." Dr. Morrison. She made a mental note to research him later. No doubt he was the doctor mentioned in the video, the one who owed someone a favor. "Maybe you're right," she said softly. "I'll think about it." "Good. I love you, Helena. I just want you to be okay." "I love you too." She hung up and immediately felt sick. The words had come so easily, but they tasted like poison in her mouth. How long had he been saying those words while planning to betray her? How many times had he held her, kissed her, made love to her, all while knowing what he intended to do? Helena poured another glass of wine and began planning her revenge. She would give them exactly what they wanted, a Helena who seemed to be losing her grip on reality. She would be forgetful, confused, paranoid. She would miss appointments and seem scattered in conversations. She would hand them all the evidence they needed to build their case. But while she was performing mental decline, she would be building something else entirely. A case so solid, so devastating, that when she revealed the truth, there would be no escape for any of them. Helena smiled at her reflection again, and this time it was genuine. They thought they knew her, but they had no idea what they were dealing with. She had spent years learning how to research, how to document, how to build unshakable historical records. Now she was going to make history of her own. Helena started small. The next morning she forgot to pick up her dry cleaning, then called the shop 3 times asking if they had her order ready. She made sure to sound confused and slightly irritated, exactly the kind of behavior that would seem concerning to anyone listening. At work, she asked her assistant about a meeting that had been scheduled for the following week, then asked again 20 minutes later as if she had no memory of the first conversation. She left her coffee mug in the microwave and seemed genuinely surprised when a coworker pointed it out. "Are you okay, Helena?" her supervisor asked during their weekly check-in. "You seem a little distant lately." "I'm fine," Helena replied, then rubbed her temples. "Actually, I've been having some headaches. And I feel like I can't focus sometimes. It's probably nothing." She watched her supervisor make a note on his pad, and felt a cold satisfaction. Every concerned comment, every documented incident of strange behavior, was another nail in her own coffin, or so they thought. That evening, Helena sat in her car outside her daughter's school, waiting for pickup time, and called her brother. "Hey, I'm picking up Eliana, but I can't remember, is she supposed to come home with me today or go to soccer practice?" "Helena, Eliana doesn't have soccer on Wednesdays. She hasn't had soccer on Wednesdays all season." Helena forced confusion into her voice. "Really? I could have sworn. Maybe I'm thinking of last season. Are you feeling all right? You've seemed kind of scattered lately." "I'm fine. Just tired, I guess." She paused, letting uncertainty creep in. "Although, I've been feeling a little confused about things. Like I'll remember something one way, but then it turns out I was wrong. Maybe you should talk to someone about that. Rachel knows some good doctors if you want a referral." Of course she does, Helena thought. "Maybe. Let me think about it." She hung up and sat in her car, watching other parents collect their children, and felt the weight of what she was doing. Every conversation, every confused moment, was being carefully catalogued by people who claimed to love her. They were building a case against her with her own behavior, and she was helping them do it. But while they were focused on her performance, Helena was conducting her own investigation. She had spent her lunch break at the courthouse, pulling public records on her brother's business dealings and Rachel's law practice. She found interesting connections: clients who had benefited from Rachel's expertise in competency proceedings, financial advisors who had worked with her brother on complex family situations. They weren't amateurs. This wasn't their first time. Helena drove home and found her husband waiting for her, holding a bouquet of flowers and wearing the apologetic expression he used when he felt guilty about something. "I'm sorry about last night," he said, kissing her cheek. "Let me make it up to you. How about we go out this weekend, just the two of us?" "That sounds nice," Helena replied, accepting the flowers and breathing in their scent. They were beautiful, her favorite roses from the expensive florist downtown. These are lovely. What's the occasion? Do I need an occasion to buy my wife flowers? She smiled up at him, letting her eyes be soft and trusting. Of course not. I don't know, I feel like I've been forgetting things lately. I wasn't sure if there was something special I was supposed to remember. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a flash of satisfaction that he quickly covered with concern. Forgetting things how? Helena shrugged, moving to put the flowers in water. Little stuff. Where I put my keys, what day Eliana has practice, whether I already called the dry cleaner. It's probably nothing. Maybe it's stress. You've been working a lot lately. Maybe. She turned to face him, letting worry show in her features. Do you think there's something wrong with me? The question hung in the air between them. Helena watched her husband's face carefully, seeing the calculation behind his concerned expression. This was exactly what he wanted to hear, his wife expressing doubt about her own mental state. I think you're probably just overwhelmed, he said, pulling her into his arms. But if you're worried, maybe we should have you checked out. Just to be safe. Helena let herself lean into his embrace, marveling at how natural it felt, even knowing what she knew. The human capacity for deception was truly remarkable, both his and her own. Dr. Morrison might be a good person to talk to, he continued, his voice carefully casual. Rachel recommended him. She says he's very good with situations like this. What kind of situations? Stress, anxiety, memory issues. He specializes in helping people figure out what's going on. Helena nodded against his chest. Okay, maybe I'll call him. That night, after her husband fell asleep, Helena crept to her home office and continued her research. She had found Dr. Morrison's credentials, and they were impressive, too impressive for someone who would be willing to falsify a psychiatric evaluation for money. Unless he didn't know that's what he was doing. Helena dug deeper and found the connection. Dr. Morrison had been Rachel's professor in law school, and later served as an expert witness in several of her cases. He trusted her professional judgment. If Rachel brought him a patient and suggested she was concerned about competency issues, he would probably take that assessment seriously. They weren't planning to buy a corrupt doctor. They were planning to use an honest one. The realization was almost admiring in its cleverness. Rachel would express professional concern about her sister-in-law's mental state, perhaps mention some troubling behaviors she had witnessed. She would recommend evaluation by someone she trusted. Dr. Morrison would conduct a legitimate assessment, but he would be primed to look for signs of incompetence, and Helena's carefully crafted performance would give him plenty to find. Helena leaned back in her chair, staring at Dr. Morrison's photograph on his professional website. He looked kind, competent, exactly the sort of person you would trust with something as important as a mental health evaluation. She was going to destroy his professional reputation along with everyone else's. The thought should have bothered her more than it did. Helena opened a new document on her computer and began typing, documenting everything she had learned, every connection she had discovered, every piece of the puzzle that was slowly taking shape. She was building her own case now, methodically and thoroughly, the way she had been trained to preserve historical records. The only difference was that this time she was both the historian and the history being made. 3 weeks into her performance, Helena had become a master of controlled chaos. She arrived late to work twice, claiming she had gotten confused about the time. She left her car keys in the refrigerator and spent 20 minutes looking for them while her husband watched with carefully hidden satisfaction. She called her neighbor asking about a neighborhood meeting that had happened the previous month, acting genuinely confused when reminded that she had attended it herself. But for every moment of staged confusion, Helena spent 2 hours gathering evidence. She had installed a small recording device in her purse, capturing conversations with her brother and sister-in-law. She photographed documents when she visited their homes, memorizing financial records and legal papers. She built detailed timelines of money transfers and account changes, mapping the systematic dismantling of her financial independence. Most importantly, she discovered she wasn't their first victim. Helena found court records from 3 years earlier involving Rachel's representation of another family. An elderly man whose adult children had him declared incompetent after claims of dementia, despite medical records showing only minor cognitive decline. Rachel had represented the children, and Helena's brother had served as the financial advisor who restructured the man's assets. The man had died 6 months after losing control of his finances, alone in a state-run facility while his children sold his house and liquidated his investments. Helena stared at the death certificate on her computer screen, feeling rage burn through her like acid. This wasn't just about money. This was about people who destroyed lives professionally, systematically, without conscience. She printed everything and locked it in a safety deposit box at a different bank, one her family didn't know about. Then she went home and played her part. I made an appointment with Dr. Morrison, she told her husband over dinner, watching Eliana color at the kitchen table. For next week. That's good, honey. I think it'll help to talk to someone. I hope so. I'm starting to worry about myself. Helena looked down at her plate, letting vulnerability show in her voice. Yesterday I couldn't remember if I had picked up Eliana from school. I was sitting in the parking lot, and for a minute I couldn't remember if I had already gotten her or if I was still waiting. It was a lie, but a carefully crafted one. The kind of memory lapse that would sound alarming to a mental health professional. That must have been scary, her husband said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. It was. What if something's really wrong with me? Helena felt Eliana's eyes on her and forced herself not to look at her daughter. This was the hardest part of the deception, scaring her own child, making her worry about her mother's mental health. But it was necessary for the larger plan. Later, after Eliana was in bed, Helena found her daughter sitting on her bedroom floor, no longer coloring but holding her crayons in a tight fist. Mommy, are you sick? Helena's heart broke a little. She knelt beside her daughter, choosing her words carefully. I'm having some problems remembering things, baby. But I'm going to see a doctor and they're going to help me figure it out. Like when Grandpa got confused before he died? Helena's grandfather had suffered from dementia in his final years, a comparison that would undoubtedly be made during her evaluation. Something like that, maybe. But different doctors know different things now. I'm going to be okay. Promise. Promise. Helena held her daughter until she fell asleep, then sat in the dark planning the destruction of everyone who had forced her to lie to her own child. The next morning brought new developments. Helena arrived at work to find her supervisor waiting in her office, along with the human resources director. Helena, we need to talk, her supervisor said. There have been some concerns about your work lately. Helena's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression neutral. What kind of concerns? The HR director opened a folder. Several incidents over the past few weeks. Missed deadlines, filing errors, confusion about project details. Your assistant mentioned that you seemed to have trouble remembering conversations from earlier the same day. They had a file on her. A documented record of her declining performance at work. Helena realized her husband must have contacted them, expressing concern about his wife's mental state, asking them to keep an eye on her. I've been having some memory issues, Helena admitted. I'm seeing a doctor about it next week. We're relieved to hear that, her supervisor said. We care about you, Helena, but we also have to think about the integrity of our archives. Some of the projects you're working on are irreplaceable historical documents. Of course. I understand. We think it might be best if you took some time off while you address these health concerns. Paid leave, of course. Just until we know what we're dealing with. Helena nodded, letting them see her relief at their understanding. That's probably for the best. I've been worried about making mistakes. She cleaned out her desk that afternoon, accepting the sympathetic looks from coworkers who had been told she was dealing with health issues. Everyone was kind, concerned, supportive. No one suspected that her confusion and forgetfulness were as carefully choreographed as a ballet. That evening, Helena called her brother to tell him about the work situation. They put me on leave, she said, letting exhaustion color her voice. I think I scared them when I filed the Mitchell papers in the wrong Century folder. Jesus, Helena. That's not like you at all. I know. That's what's scaring me. I've never made mistakes like that before, but lately... She trailed off. I have the appointment with Dr. Morrison tomorrow. Maybe he can figure out what's wrong. Rachel spoke to him yesterday, actually. She mentioned she was concerned about you. Of course she did. Helena closed her eyes, picturing Rachel making her professional assessment, planting seeds of doubt in Dr. Morrison's mind before he ever met his patient. What did she tell him? Just that she's noticed some things. Memory problems, confusion, maybe some mood changes. She's worried about you, we all are. Helena had to grip the phone tighter to keep from screaming. Rachel had never spent enough time with her to notice anything, mood changes or otherwise. But Dr. Morrison wouldn't know that. I appreciate everyone looking out for me, Helena said instead. I just want to get better. You will. We're all here to help. After she hung up, Helena sat in her kitchen and felt the net closing around her. They had isolated her from work, documented her declining performance, involved medical professionals, created a narrative of mental illness that would be almost impossible to refute once it was officially established. If she had been the person they thought she was, confused, forgetful, increasingly unable to manage her own life, she would have been helpless against this systematic destruction. But Helena wasn't confused. She was angry. And tomorrow she would begin the final phase of her plan. Dr. Morrison's office was exactly what Helena had expected: warm lighting, comfortable furniture, walls lined with degrees and certifications. He was a man in his 60s with kind eyes and a gentle manner, the sort of person who had dedicated his career to helping people navigate mental health challenges. Helena almost felt sorry for what she was about to do to him. "Rachel speaks very highly of you," Dr. Morrison said as they settled into their chairs. "She's expressed some concerns about changes she's noticed recently." "What kind of changes?" Helena asked, playing the part of someone genuinely worried about her own mental state. "Memory issues primarily. Some confusion about dates and events. She mentioned you seemed to have difficulty following conversations at your last family gathering." Helena nodded, filing away another lie from Rachel. They hadn't had a family gathering in months. "I've been noticing problems too. At work, at home. It's frightening." Dr. Morrison spent the next hour conducting what Helena recognized as a standard cognitive assessment. She answered his questions carefully, getting some right, missing others in ways that would suggest mild cognitive impairment without being so obvious as to seem fake. "I'm going to recommend some additional testing," Dr. Morrison said at the end of the session. "Brain imaging, blood work, a more comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation. We want to rule out any underlying medical conditions." "Do you think something's seriously wrong with me?" Dr. Morrison's expression was carefully neutral. "I think we need more information. But Helena, I want you to know that whatever we find, there are treatments available. You're not alone in this." Helena left his office and sat in her car for several minutes, composing herself. Dr. Morrison was a good man trying to help what he believed was a patient in crisis. The fact that she was about to destroy his professional reputation along with everyone else's was collateral damage she had learned to accept. That afternoon, Helena drove to Rachel's law office. She had called ahead, claiming she needed legal advice about her situation, and Rachel had immediately cleared her schedule. Helena arrived looking appropriately distressed, carrying a folder of financial documents she claimed to be confused about. "I'm so glad you called," Rachel said, ushering Helena into her elegant office. "We've all been worried about you." "I feel like I'm losing my mind," Helena said, settling into the chair across from Rachel's desk. "Dr. Morrison thinks there might be something really wrong with me." "What kind of something?" Helena opened her folder, spreading papers across Rachel's desk with slightly trembling hands. "I can't understand any of this anymore. The trust fund statements, the investment accounts, the insurance policies. It all looks like gibberish to me." Rachel leaned forward, her eyes lighting up as she examined the documents. "These are pretty complex financial instruments. It's not surprising that they're confusing, especially if you're dealing with cognitive issues. But I used to understand this stuff. At least I think I did." Helena rubbed her temples. "I called my brother yesterday about moving some money around, but I couldn't remember why I wanted to do it or where I wanted to move it to." "Memory problems can be really frightening," Rachel said, her voice full of professional sympathy. "Have you thought about what might happen if your condition gets worse?" "What do you mean?" "Well, managing this kind of wealth requires clear thinking and good judgment. If your cognitive abilities continue to decline, you might need help making important decisions." Helena let confusion cloud her features. "What kind of help?" "There are legal mechanisms to protect people in your situation. Guardianship arrangements, power of attorney designations, trust modifications. The goal is to make sure your assets are protected and your daughter's future is secure. Would you be able to help me with something like that?" Rachel's smile was warm and reassuring. "Of course. That's exactly the kind of work I specialize in. I've helped many families navigate these difficult situations." Helena nodded gratefully, gathering up her papers. "Can I think about it for a few days? Everything feels so overwhelming right now." "Take all the time you need. But Helena, don't wait too long. These things are easier to arrange while you still have full capacity to make decisions." Helena left Rachel's office and drove straight to her safety deposit box, where she added Rachel's business card to her growing collection of evidence. Then she made another recording, dictating her impressions of the conversation while they were fresh in her memory. Rachel hadn't just offered to help. She had steered the conversation toward legal mechanisms that would transfer control of Helena's assets to others. She had emphasized urgency, the need to act while Helena was still competent to sign documents. The trap was closing exactly as planned. That evening, Helena's brother called. Rachel mentioned you stopped by her office today. She's really concerned about you. I'm concerned about me too, Helena replied. I looked at my financial statements today, and I couldn't understand half of what I was reading. Rachel thinks I might need help managing things. That's probably a good idea. These kinds of decisions are complicated even when you're thinking clearly. She mentioned something about guardianship arrangements. Do you know what that means? Helena listened as her brother explained the legal process of having someone declared incompetent and appointing a guardian to manage their affairs. He spoke carefully as if explaining a difficult concept to someone with limited understanding, but she could hear the excitement underlying his words. It sounds like a lot of paperwork, Helena said when he finished. It is, but Rachel can handle all of that. The important thing is making sure you and Eliana are protected. Protected from what? From making financial decisions that might not be in your best interest. From people who might try to take advantage of your condition. The irony was so complete Helena had to bite her lip to keep from laughing. Her brother was warning her about people who might exploit her vulnerability while actively planning to do exactly that. I suppose that makes sense, she said. Should I ask Rachel to start preparing the paperwork? I think that would be wise. But Helena, you should know that this kind of arrangement would mean giving up control over your finances. Are you prepared for that? Helena closed her eyes, picturing the moment when she would reveal everything they had done. If it's what's best for Eliana and me, then yes. I trust you and Rachel to look out for us. We will. I promise. Another lie, another broken promise from someone who claimed to love her. Helena added it to her mental collection, each betrayal strengthening her resolve. After she hung up, Helena pulled out her laptop and began typing her daily summary of events. Every conversation, every lie, every manipulation was being carefully documented. She had audio recordings, photographs of documents, detailed timelines and witness statements from the people who thought they were building a case against her. What they had actually done was build an airtight case for criminal conspiracy, fraud, and attempted theft. Helena looked at the calendar on her desk. 6 weeks. That's how long she had been playing this role, pretending to lose her mind while systematically exposing theirs. The competency hearing was scheduled for next month, and everything was proceeding exactly as they had planned. Which meant it was time to start phase 2 of her own plan. Helena's decline accelerated. She got lost driving to the grocery store she had shopped at for 8 years, calling her husband in tears from a parking lot 3 miles away. She forgot Eliana's school pickup time and arrived an hour late, panicked and apologetic. She left the stove on overnight and woke up to find her husband checking all the appliances, his concern no longer entirely feigned. Maybe you shouldn't be alone during the day, he suggested over breakfast, watching her stare blankly at her coffee cup as if she couldn't remember how it had gotten there. You think I'm dangerous? Helena asked, letting hurt creep into her voice. Not dangerous. Just, I worry about you hurting yourself by accident. Forgetting the stove, getting lost while driving. What if something happened to you while Eliana was here? Helena nodded slowly as if the thought hadn't occurred to her. Maybe you're right. I don't want to put her at risk. Rachel mentioned that her firm handles temporary care arrangements. Just until we figure out what's going on with your health. There it was. The suggestion she had been waiting for. They wanted Eliana out of the house, away from Helena's influence, while they completed their legal maneuvering. You mean like a babysitter? More like, Eliana could stay with Rachel and your brother for a few weeks. Just while we get your treatment sorted out. Helena felt genuine panic at the thought of her daughter living with these people, even temporarily. But she forced herself to consider it, to look uncertain and worried. I don't know. She's never been away from home for that long. It would just be until you're feeling better. Rachel has experience with these situations, and you know how much she cares about Eliana. Rachel, who had discussed Eliana's guardianship like a business transaction. Rachel, who was building a political career on protecting vulnerable families while planning to destroy one. Maybe, Helena said finally. Let me think about it. That afternoon, while her husband was at work, Helena made several phone calls. She contacted a private investigator, a forensic accountant, and a criminal defense attorney. Not for herself, but to understand how their scheme would unfold once she exposed it. Then she called her daughter's school. Hi, this is Helena Park, Eliana's mother. I need to update our pickup authorization list. Of course, Mrs. Park. What changes do you need to make? I want to remove my brother and sister-in-law from the authorized list. They should not be allowed to pick up Eliana under any circumstances. Helena provided the updated information and her identification number, then asked for written confirmation of the changes. When they tried to take temporary custody of her daughter, they would find that particular avenue blocked. She spent the rest of the day making similar calls to Eliana's doctor, her dentist, her after-school program. Anyone who might be contacted about transferring care or custody found Helena's instructions clear and unambiguous. No one except Helena herself or her husband was authorized to make decisions about Eliana's care. Her husband wouldn't understand the significance of these changes until it was too late. That evening, Helena sat down with Eliana for a conversation she had been dreading. "Baby, we need to talk about some grown-up things." Eliana looked up from her homework, her expression immediately serious. At 8 years old, she had already learned to read the tone in her mother's voice. "Mommy, are you getting sicker?" Helena's heart clenched. "No, baby. But some people think I am, and they might try to tell you things that aren't true. They might say that Mommy can't take care of you anymore, or that you need to live somewhere else for a while. But that's not true, right?" "No, it's not true. But if anyone ever tries to take you away from me, anyone at all, I want you to remember something very important. You call 911 and you tell them that someone is trying to kidnap you. Do you understand?" Eliana's eyes went wide. "Kidnap me? I hope it never happens, baby. But if it does, you remember what Mommy told you. You are not going anywhere with anyone except Mommy, no matter what they say, no matter who they are." "Okay. Okay." Helena hugged her daughter tightly, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo and feeling the fierce protectiveness that had driven every decision of the past 2 months. Later that night, Helena's phone rang. Rachel's name appeared on the screen. "Helena, I hope I'm not calling too late. I wanted to check on you after our conversation yesterday." "I'm okay. Still thinking about what you said. I'm glad you're taking time to consider your options. But I have to be honest with you, I'm concerned about Eliana's well-being." Helena's grip tightened on the phone. "What do you mean?" "Your brother mentioned some incidents. Picking her up late from school, forgetting about her activities. I know you love her, but if your condition is affecting your ability to care for her." "I would never hurt Eliana." "Of course not. But Helena, what if you forgot to pick her up entirely? What if you left her somewhere by accident? These cognitive issues can progress quickly." Helena let silence stretch between them, as if she was struggling to process the possibility. "I hadn't thought about that," she said finally. "I have experience with temporary custody arrangements that protect children while their parents get treatment. It's not permanent, just a safety measure." "You mean Eliana would come live with you?" "Just temporarily. She could stay with your brother and me until you're feeling better. She knows us, she'd be comfortable, and you could focus on your health without worrying about her." Helena closed her eyes, marveling at how smoothly Rachel presented child stealing as child protection. "How temporary?" she asked. "A few weeks, maybe a month or 2. However long your treatment takes. Treatment that would involve being declared mentally incompetent and losing all rights to make decisions about her own life or her daughter's future. Treatment that would end with Helena in a facility somewhere while Rachel and her brother liquidated her assets and decided Eliana's fate." "I should probably talk to my husband about this," Helena said. "Of course. But Helena, don't wait too long. If Child Protective Services gets involved, the process becomes much more complicated and traumatic for everyone." Another threat, delivered with professional compassion. Helena added it to her growing list of evidence. "I understand. Thank you for caring about us. We're family. We'll always look out for you and Eliana." Helena hung up and immediately began typing, documenting every detail of Rachel's manipulation while it was fresh in her memory. The audio recording was safely stored on her phone, but she wanted written backup of everything. Tomorrow she would call Dr. Morrison's office and schedule her follow-up appointment, the one where he would deliver his preliminary assessment of her cognitive decline. She would express appropriate concern and ask what came next. She already knew what came next. The competency hearing, the transfer of assets, the gradual erasure of Helena Park from her own life. But what they didn't know was that Helena had been building something else entirely during her weeks of performance. A trap so carefully constructed, so thoroughly documented, that when it snapped shut, there would be no escape for any of them. Helena smiled as she typed, thinking about the moment when she would drop her act and show them exactly who they had been underestimating all along. The neuropsychological evaluation results arrived on a Tuesday morning that felt like the calm before a hurricane. Helena sat in Dr. Morrison's office, listening to him explain her test scores with the gentle professionalism of someone delivering difficult news to a patient he genuinely wanted to help. "The results show some concerning patterns," he said, his voice carefully measured. significant short-term memory deficits, problems with executive function, difficulty with complex reasoning tasks. Helena nodded, letting appropriate worry show on her face. What does that mean? Combined with the behavioral changes your family has described, I believe we're looking at early-stage cognitive decline. The exact cause is still unclear. We'll need more testing to rule out treatable conditions. But you think it's going to get worse? Dr. Morrison leaned forward, his expression compassionate. Helena, I want to be honest with you. Based on what I'm seeing, yes, I expect your symptoms to progress. How quickly we can't predict, but I think it's important that you start making plans for your future care. Helena felt a moment of genuine admiration for her own performance. She had fooled one of the most respected neuropsychologists in the city so completely that he was recommending exactly what her family wanted him to recommend. What kind of plans? Legal arrangements to ensure your wishes are respected as your condition progresses. Financial planning to secure your daughter's future. Perhaps most importantly, identifying people you trust to help make decisions on your behalf. There it was. The professional recommendation they needed to justify everything that came next. My sister-in-law is a lawyer, Helena said hesitantly. She's offered to help with the legal arrangements. That's fortunate. Having someone with expertise in these matters will make the process much smoother. Helena left Dr. Morrison's office with a folder full of educational materials about cognitive decline and a follow-up appointment scheduled for 6 weeks later. By then she would either be vindicated or destroyed. She had 2 weeks until the competency hearing. That afternoon, Helena met with Rachel to discuss the legal arrangements Dr. Morrison had recommended. Rachel's office felt different this time, more like a trap than a sanctuary, with its warm lighting and expensive furniture designed to make clients feel comfortable while signing away their rights. Dr. Morrison called me yesterday, Rachel said as they settled into their chairs. He's very concerned about the progression of your symptoms. He thinks I'm going to get worse. He does. Which is why it's so important that we get these arrangements in place now, while you still have the capacity to make these decisions yourself. Rachel spread documents across her desk: guardianship papers, power of attorney forms, trust modifications, custody arrangements. A complete legal framework for dismantling Helena's life. This is a lot of paperwork, Helena said, letting overwhelm color her voice. I know it seems complicated, but each document serves an important purpose. This one gives your brother power of attorney over your financial affairs. This one establishes guardianship for personal care decisions. This one modifies your trust to ensure Eliana's needs are met. Helena picked up each document, pretending to read while actually memorizing the specific language Rachel had used. Every clause was carefully crafted to transfer maximum control while appearing to protect Helena's interests. Who would be Eliana's guardian if something happened to me? That would be me, actually. I have experience with child advocacy, and the court would see that as beneficial for her welfare. Rachel's expression was warm and reassuring, as if she were offering to take on a burden rather than seizing control of a $3 million trust fund. And my husband? Where does he fit into all this? He'll be the primary guardian for day-to-day decisions, of course. But given the complexity of your financial situation, it makes sense to have someone with legal expertise overseeing the broader picture. Helena nodded slowly as if struggling to process the arrangements. When do we need to file all this paperwork? Soon. Dr. Morrison's evaluation gives us a window where the court will recognize your capacity to make these decisions, but if we wait too long, they might question whether you were competent to sign. Time pressure. Another manipulation tactic, designed to prevent Helena from seeking independent advice or reconsidering her choices. Can I take these home to review them? Of course, but don't wait too long. I've already scheduled the hearing for next Friday. Helena's pulse quickened. Hearing? Just a formality. The judge needs to approve the guardianship arrangement, but with Dr. Morrison's evaluation and these signed documents, it should be straightforward. A competency hearing scheduled without Helena's knowledge or consent. Another piece of evidence for her growing case. Should I be there? Rachel's smile was practiced and reassuring. You don't need to worry about that. I'll handle everything. Helena left Rachel's office with the unsigned documents and a head full of rage that she carefully kept hidden behind her mask of confusion and gratitude. They had scheduled her competency hearing like a routine business meeting, confident that she was too impaired to understand or object to what was happening. That evening, Helena made her final preparations. She copied every document Rachel had given her, highlighting the most egregious clauses and adding explanatory notes for the judge who would eventually review them. She organized her audio recordings chronologically, creating a timeline of conspiracy and deception that would be impossible to dismiss or explain away. Most importantly, she contacted the local newspaper's investigative reporter, a woman named Jennifer Walsh who specialized in exposing corruption in family court proceedings. "I have a story for you," Helena said when Jennifer answered her phone. "It involves lawyers, doctors, and judges collaborating to steal from vulnerable adults." "I'm listening." Helena outlined the basic facts of her case, providing enough detail to capture Jennifer's interest without revealing her own deception. "Can you prove all this?" Jennifer asked. "I have recordings, documents, financial records, testimony from unwitting accomplices. Everything you'd need to write a story that would end careers and possibly result in criminal charges." "When can we meet?" "Friday morning. There's a competency hearing scheduled for that afternoon that you'll want to attend." Helena hung up and felt the familiar satisfaction of a plan coming together. Rachel wanted to handle everything without Helena being present, but she was about to discover that Helena had arranged for quite an audience. The next morning, Helena's husband found her sitting at the kitchen table, staring at Rachel's documents with the glazed expression of someone struggling to understand simple concepts. "Rachel said you picked up the paperwork yesterday. Have you had a chance to look it over?" "I tried," Helena said, her voice small and defeated. "But it's all so complicated. I don't understand half of what it says." "That's okay. The important thing is that people you trust are looking out for you and Eliana." Helena looked up at him with the innocent faith of someone who still believed her husband loved her. "You really think this is what's best?" "I do. Rachel knows what she's doing, and your brother has always been good with money. You don't need to worry about any of this anymore." "What if I change my mind later?" Her husband's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Change your mind about what?" "About the guardianship, the power of attorney, all of it. What if I get better and want to manage my own affairs again?" "Well, that would be wonderful, but Helena, Dr. Morrison doesn't think that's likely to happen. These kinds of conditions usually get worse, not better." Another lie delivered with loving concern. Helena had researched cognitive decline extensively during her preparation, and she knew that many conditions causing memory problems were treatable or temporary. But her husband and his co-conspirators had chosen a neuropsychologist whose specialty was degenerative diseases, ensuring that his assessment would lean toward the worst-case scenario. "I suppose you're right," Helena said, picking up a pen. "Should I sign these now? Are you sure you're ready?" Helena looked at the documents that would destroy her life, then at the man who had promised to love and protect her, then at the photo of her daughter on the refrigerator. "I'm ready," she said, and began signing her name with the careful deliberation of someone who wanted to make sure she got it right. The family court hearing room looked exactly like Helena had imagined, sterile, formal, designed to intimidate rather than comfort. She sat in the gallery with her husband, watching Rachel present their case to Judge Patricia Coleman with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. Helena played her part perfectly. She appeared confused by the proceedings, occasionally whispering questions to her husband, looking overwhelmed by the legal terminology and formal atmosphere. To anyone watching, she seemed like exactly what Rachel claimed she was, a woman whose mental faculties had declined to the point where she could no longer manage her own affairs. "Your Honor," Rachel was saying, "Dr. Morrison's evaluation clearly indicates significant cognitive impairment. My client is unable to understand complex financial decisions, has difficulty with basic reasoning tasks, and exhibits concerning memory deficits." Judge Coleman reviewed the neuropsychological report with the careful attention of someone who took these proceedings seriously. "Dr. Morrison, you've evaluated Mrs. Park personally?" "Yes, Your Honor. Over the course of several sessions, I conducted comprehensive cognitive testing. The results indicate early-stage dementia with rapid progression." Helena felt a flutter of guilt as she watched Dr. Morrison testify. He genuinely believed he was protecting a vulnerable woman from exploitation, unaware that he was participating in exactly the kind of abuse he thought he was preventing. "And Mrs. Park has consented to these arrangements?" Judge Coleman asked. "She has," Rachel replied, producing the signed documents. "She recognizes her limitations and wants to ensure her daughter's welfare is protected." Helena watched the judge review her signatures, remembering the moment she had signed each document while her husband watched approvingly. The irony was perfect. They had obtained her consent to their conspiracy through deception, and that consent would ultimately be their downfall. "I'm satisfied that Mrs. Park understood the nature of these arrangements when she signed them," Judge Coleman said. "However, I want to hear from Mrs. Park herself before making a final determination." Helena felt her pulse quicken. This wasn't part of Rachel's plan. They had expected the judge to approve the guardianship based on the documentation alone. "Mrs. Park," Judge Coleman said, looking directly at Helena. "Do you understand what's happening here today?" Helena stood slowly, letting uncertainty show in her movement. "I think so. They're trying to help me because I can't remember things anymore. Do you understand that this arrangement will give other people control over your finances and personal decisions?" "My brother is good with money," Helena said, her voice soft and trusting. "And Rachel is a lawyer. They know better than I do what's best for me and Eliana." Judge Coleman nodded, her expression sympathetic. "Mrs. Park, is there anything you want to say about these arrangements? Any concerns or objections?" This was the moment Helena had been planning for months. The moment when she would drop her performance and reveal the truth about everyone in this courtroom. She looked at Rachel, confident and professional in her expensive suit. At her brother, sitting in the front row with the satisfied expression of someone whose plan was succeeding perfectly. At her husband, whose hand squeezed hers supportively while he calculated his share of her trust fund. At Dr. Morrison, whose reputation she was about to destroy along with everyone else's. Helena took a breath and felt the weight of her decision. She could end this now, expose their conspiracy, reclaim her life and protect her daughter. All she had to do was drop the act. Instead, she shook her head and said, "No, Your Honor. I trust them to take care of everything." Judge Coleman studied Helena's face for a long moment, then looked back at the paperwork. "Very well. I'm prepared to approve these arrangements, but I want to schedule a review hearing in 6 months to assess Mrs. Park's condition and the effectiveness of these guardianship provisions." "Of course, Your Honor," Rachel replied smoothly. "And I want to appoint an independent guardian ad litem to monitor Mrs. Park's welfare and ensure her interests are being protected." Rachel's confidence flickered for just a moment. "Your Honor, I don't think that's necessary. The family is very supportive and, nevertheless, I'm appointing Ms. Jennifer Walsh to serve in that capacity." Helena felt her heart skip. Jennifer Walsh, the investigative reporter she had contacted 3 days ago, was being appointed as her court-appointed advocate. Either this was an extraordinary coincidence, or Judge Coleman was more suspicious of this arrangement than she was letting on. "Ms. Walsh," Judge Coleman continued, addressing someone in the back of the courtroom, "you'll receive copies of all relevant documents and have full access to evaluate Mrs. Park's living situation and care." Helena turned to see Jennifer Walsh standing in the gallery, notebook in hand, watching the proceedings with the sharp attention of someone who smelled a story. Rachel's mask of professional competence was starting to slip. "Your Honor, we weren't expecting. The appointment of a guardian ad litem is within the court's discretionary authority," Judge Coleman said firmly. "Especially in cases involving significant assets and complex family dynamics." The judge signed the guardianship order, but Helena could see that Rachel's perfect plan had just developed its first crack. Jennifer Walsh's involvement meant that every decision they made would be scrutinized by someone whose job it was to expose exactly the kind of conspiracy they were engaged in. As the hearing concluded, Helena maintained her confused, grateful demeanor while her mind raced with new possibilities. She had planned to reveal everything today, but Judge Coleman's unexpected appointment had given her something better: a professional ally with the power to investigate and the platform to expose what she discovered. "How do you feel?" her husband asked as they left the courthouse. "Relieved," Helena replied honestly. "I feel like everything's going to work out exactly the way it should." Rachel was already on her phone, speaking in urgent whispers to Helena's brother. Their simple plan to quietly steal Helena's assets had just become a very public legal proceeding with ongoing oversight. Helena smiled as she got into her husband's car, finally understanding why Judge Coleman had made such an unexpected decision. The judge had reviewed Rachel's previous cases and recognized the pattern. She had seen the systematic exploitation of vulnerable adults disguised as protective legal arrangements. Judge Coleman hadn't been protecting Helena from her family's conspiracy. She had been setting a trap for the conspirators themselves. And Helena was no longer the only one planning their destruction. Jennifer Walsh arrived at Helena's house on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after the competency hearing, carrying a briefcase and wearing the expression of someone who had uncovered something significant. Helena answered the door in her robe, her hair uncombed, playing the role of a woman whose mental state was deteriorating under the stress of losing control over her life. "Mrs. Park, I'm Jennifer Walsh, your court-appointed guardian ad litem. I'd like to talk with you about your current living situation." "Oh," Helena said, blinking as if trying to remember who Jennifer was. "Rachel mentioned you might visit. Please come in." Helena led Jennifer to the living room, moving slowly and sitting down carefully, as if simple tasks required significant concentration. "How are you adjusting to the new arrangements?" Jennifer asked, her pen poised over her notebook. "It's been hard," Helena replied, letting vulnerability creep into her voice. "I feel like I'm losing myself, piece by piece. Yesterday I couldn't remember my own phone number." Jennifer made notes, her expression sympathetic but professional. "Are you comfortable with your brother managing your financial affairs?" "I suppose so. He says everything is being handled properly, but—" Helena trailed off, looking confused and worried. "But what?" "I tried to check my bank balance last week, and they said I didn't have access to that account anymore." "Is that normal?" Jennifer's pen stopped moving. "What did your brother tell you when you asked him about it?" "He said I shouldn't worry about money anymore, that it was too complicated for me to understand." Helena twisted her hands in her lap. "But it's my money, isn't it? Even if I'm sick, it's still mine?" "Yes, Mrs. Park. It's still your money. You should have access to information about your own accounts, even with a financial guardian in place." Helena watched Jennifer make more notes, her writing becoming more urgent. "There's something else," Helena said hesitantly. "Last week, Rachel came by with more papers to sign. She said they were just updates to the previous arrangements, but—" She got up and retrieved a folder from a side table. "I made copies before I signed them. I don't understand what they mean." Jennifer took the folder and began reading, her expression growing increasingly grim. The documents Helena had copied were asset transfer forms, moving Helena's remaining investments into accounts controlled solely by her brother, with no oversight or accountability requirements. "Mrs. Park, these documents essentially give your brother complete control over your assets with no restrictions. Did anyone explain that to you?" "Rachel said it would make things simpler. That I didn't need to worry about the details." Helena looked genuinely distressed. "Did I make a mistake? I just wanted to do what was best for Eliana." Jennifer closed the folder and looked at Helena directly. "Mrs. Park, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Do you trust the people who are making these financial decisions for you?" Helena was quiet for a long moment, as if struggling with a difficult realization. "I want to trust them. They're my family. But sometimes I feel like they're talking about me like I'm not even there. Like I'm already dead." "What do you mean?" "Last week, I heard Rachel on the phone talking about Eliana's school situation. She was discussing enrolling her in a different school for next year, without asking me what I thought. When I questioned her about it, she said I had agreed to it, but I don't remember agreeing to anything like that." Jennifer's expression hardened. "Mrs. Park, I'm going to be conducting a thorough review of your case. I may need to speak with you several more times over the next few weeks." "Is something wrong?" "I'm not sure yet. But I want you to know that my job is to protect your interests, not anyone else's. If you ever feel pressured to sign something or agree to something you don't understand, you can call me." After Jennifer left, Helena went to her bedroom and closed the door. She had just delivered a masterful performance, providing Jennifer with enough concerns to launch a serious investigation while maintaining her cover as a confused, vulnerable woman. But the performance was taking its toll. 3 months of pretending to lose her mind was affecting her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Sometimes she caught herself genuinely forgetting things, wondering if the stress of deception was creating the very symptoms she was faking. Her phone rang. Rachel's name appeared on the screen. "Helena, Jennifer Walsh just left my office. She had some very concerning questions about your financial arrangements." "What kind of questions?" "She seems to think there might be some impropriety in how your assets are being managed." "Did you tell her you were unhappy with the arrangements?" Helena let confusion color her voice. "I don't think so. I told her I was grateful for everyone's help. Why would she think something was wrong?" "I don't know, but we need to be very careful about what you say to her. She doesn't understand your family situation and she might misinterpret things." "What should I do?" "Just remember that we're trying to protect you and Eliana. If Jennifer asks you questions that seem designed to make you doubt us, you don't have to answer them." Helena felt a chill at Rachel's tone. The mask of professional concern was slipping, revealing something harder underneath. "Are you saying I shouldn't talk to her?" "I'm saying you should be careful. Jennifer Walsh has her own agenda, and it might not be what's best for your family." After Rachel hung up, Helena sat on her bed and realized that her plan was working better than she had ever hoped. Jennifer's investigation was forcing her family to reveal their true nature, and their attempts to control Helena's communication with her court-appointed advocate would only make them look more suspicious. But she also realized something else. They were getting desperate, and desperate people made dangerous decisions. Helena looked at the photo of Eliana on her nightstand and made a decision. It was time to end this charade before her family did something that would put her daughter at risk. She picked up her phone and dialed Jennifer's number. "Ms. Walsh? This is Helena Park. I think we need to have another conversation. There are some things I need to tell you about my family." "What kind of things, Mrs. Park?" Helena took a deep breath, feeling the weight of months of deception lifting from her shoulders. "The kind of things that are going to put some people in prison." The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters when Helena emerged from the criminal hearing, her hand firmly clasped in Eliana's. 3 months had passed since her conversation with Jennifer Walsh. 3 months of investigation, grand jury proceedings, and careful preparation for this moment. Behind her, Rachel, her brother, and her husband were led away in handcuffs, their faces hidden from the cameras as they were processed for conspiracy, fraud, and attempted theft. Dr. Morrison had lost his medical license pending a full investigation into his evaluation practices, though Helena felt genuinely sorry for his role in the conspiracy. "Mom," Eliana said, squeezing Helena's hand as they walked to their car, "are the bad people really going away?" "Yes, baby. They're going away for a long time. And we get to keep our house? We get to keep everything. Plus some things that belong to other people they hurt." The civil judgments had been substantial. In addition to recovering her own assets, Helena had been awarded damages from Rachel's law practice and her brother's financial advisory firm. More importantly, she had helped expose a network of professionals who had been systematically exploiting vulnerable adults for years. Jennifer Walsh's investigation had uncovered 7 other families who had been victimized by similar schemes. The elderly man whose case Helena had discovered during her research had been just the beginning. Rachel and her associates had refined their methods over years, targeting people with valuable assets and limited family support, then using the legal system to steal from them with impunity. Until they made the mistake of targeting someone who fought back. "Helena." She turned to see Jennifer Walsh approaching, her press credentials hanging around her neck and a satisfied smile on her face. "How does it feel to have your life back?" "Surreal," Helena replied honestly. "For so long I was pretending to be someone else that sometimes I forgot who I really was." "Any regrets about how you handled it?" Helena considered the question seriously. "I regret that Dr. Morrison got caught up in something he didn't understand. I regret that my daughter had to see her family torn apart. But I don't regret fighting for what was mine." Jennifer nodded. The story runs tomorrow. Front page of the Sunday edition. The Archivist's Revenge, How One Woman Exposed a Multi-million-dollar Elder Abuse Conspiracy. Helena smiled at the headline. "I like it. What's next for you and Eliana?" "We're moving," Helena said, looking down at her daughter. "New city, new school, new start. Somewhere no one knows our story unless we choose to tell it." "And your husband?" Helena's expression hardened slightly. "He's facing 8 to 12 years in federal prison. We'll be divorced long before he's eligible for parole." That evening, Helena and Eliana sat in their empty living room, surrounded by boxes packed for their move to Seattle. Helena had taken a position as head archivist at the University of Washington, and Eliana was excited about their new apartment near the waterfront. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Anything, baby." "Why did they try to hurt us?" Helena had been dreading this question, but she had promised herself she would always be honest with her daughter about what had happened. "Some people care more about money than they do about family," she said carefully. "They thought I was weak and confused, so they tried to take advantage of me." "But you weren't really confused, were you?" Helena smiled. "No, I wasn't. I was pretending so I could catch them doing bad things. Like a spy. Something like that." Eliana was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "Are you still pretending now?" "No, baby. From now on, I'm just going to be myself. No more pretending, no more lies, no more games. Just me and you starting over." Helena looked around their empty house, remembering the woman who had lived here just a year ago. That Helena had been trusting, accommodating, content to let others make important decisions about her life. She had believed that family meant safety, that love meant protection. This Helena knew better. She also knew that the quiet ones, the ones who observed, who documented, who remembered every detail, were often underestimated. But they were also the ones who ultimately held the most power, because they understood that truth was more valuable than money, more lasting than deception, and more dangerous than any weapon. Helena Park had learned to fight for herself and her daughter. She had learned that sometimes the best way to reveal the truth was to let people think you were too confused to understand their lies. Most importantly, she had learned that revenge served cold was often the most satisfying kind of all. As she tucked Eliana into bed that night, her daughter asked one final question. Mom, are we going to be okay now? Helena kissed her forehead and smoothed her hair. We're going to be better than okay, baby. We're going to be free. Outside, Helena could hear the sound of their neighbors going about their evening routines, unaware that the quiet woman next door had just dismantled a criminal conspiracy and reclaimed her life. She smiled in the darkness, thinking about their new beginning in Seattle, where she and Eliana would write the next chapter of their story. This time, Helena would be the one holding the pen.